In this section, we're going to take up the 7th chord and the 5 chord. So far, we've been talking about major chords and playing in the 1 or the 4. If we played in the key of G, we'd be playing the G chord and we play major scales. And if it went to a C chord and we played a fill, that's the 4 chord, and we played a major scale. In the 5 chord, or in the key of G, if we went to the D, it should be a D7th. So we're going to start off with the basic D7th positions and learn the scales and the fills that apply to a 7th. In no way can we play the major chord fills we've been playing as the 5 chord. There's 2 different things we must learn. Only 2 things. There's major chord fills and there's 7th chord fills. So we're going to use the A and B pedals and find out all the ways that we can play 7th chord scales and find out where the 7th chords are. So we're going to go right from the top here and learn where the 7th chords are first, and then base our fills from that. Let's start right off with the D major chords, which we see right there on 5, the top line right in the middle, the D majors, which are 5 with the pedals. And of course you could be playing any group, 3, 4, and 5, 4, 5, and 6, or 5, 6, and 8, or you could be up on 10, down on the bottom line there as the basic D. Whatever, those are all D major chords. What we want to do is make 7th chords out of these Ds, because the Ds can be majors, but we want to establish where a 7th chord is. So looking at the top line there, if we drop back 2 frets from 5, A, and B, and we go to the 3rd fret with the B pedal in, and we lower the D lever, or the one that lowers 4 and 8, we're not necessarily going to use that D lever because this is about using the A and B pedals. So we're going to leave the D lever out. But there are things that are affected. We can go to strings 3 and 5 with the B pedal in, or strings 5 and 6, and you hear the D7. So we could be on strings 5 and 6, up on 5 with pedals, and we could go back to 3 with the B and hear the sound of a D7th. Or we could go from 5A and B and go to the right, or up 3 frets to 8A there at the top line again. And yes, that does sound like a minor chord. That truly sounds like an A minor. But in this instance, as long as the band is playing a D and we play the 8 with the A pedal, it sounds like a D9th or a D7th. So what we're looking for is how to turn the D major, 5A and B, into a D7th by going back to 3 with the B pedal. And we're leaving the D lever out, remember, because we're not even involved in that. We're just finding out what you can do with the A and the B pedals, making it easy and simple. And then going from 5A and B up to 8A, which gives you a D7th. And this is a little pattern or formula that you can go from any pedal down position. Notice this is just D with the pedals down. And you want to be able to fall back 2 frets from any of the pedal down positions and find like the D7th on 3 with a BD, or up to 8A. Now we're going to use those chords, but we're also going to use those positions to tell us where the scales are. And on the bottom line, we have the D major that's on 10. Again, we can think of that D major and just drop back 2 frets for the 8A. So the 2 down is from 10 to 8A. That'll give us that D7th. Or we can go from 10 up 3 frets with the F lever. Now we're not dealing with the F lever, but that's the one that raises 4 and 8, but there are still pieces of that if we want to use just the A and B pedal, for instance, if we're playing strings 3 and 5, which we do a lot, we could go up to 13 with the F lever in or out, and since the F lever affects the 4th string or the 8, we can still just play strings 3 and 5 and not even hit the F lever, and it sounds like a D7. Now if I hit the 4th string, it would sound pretty nice to have the F lever in, because that's a pretty rude chord there without it. But in my mind, I remember that D7th, especially for these scales and these fills, can just be up 3 frets from 10 up to 13. And I could be on strings 5 and 6 and do the same thing. So I don't necessarily have to use the F lever to play the D7th. So I have all kinds of ways. I could be down on 3, for instance, thinking of the B and the D lever for the D7th. I've got a D7th on 3 with the B pedal. I've got a D on 5 with the pedals down. I've got a D7th on 8A. I've got a D major on 10. I've got a D7th up on 13 as long as I stay off of the 4th string. And then I can go on to 15, B, and D. So this is what I'm trying to do, is find these chords and learn how to play them and use these positions as the fundamental root positions for the scales I'm playing. Now we can get into our actual phrases and scales remembering these positions. You'll see these all through these little phrases. This is your rhythm track number 3, and it's the G to D7th, or what we call a 1 to a 5 chord vamp. And this is teaching us how to play just the major chord at the front, and then play the 7th chord phrase, or the D7th, or the 5 chord as a 7th, either as a chord, and that's what we're doing over here. We're playing either the phrase, or we're going to play the actual chord there, whichever one becomes the most convenient. But let's go through the actual rhythm track so you can hear the timing of it, so you know when to play and when not to.
1, 2, 3,
Start with a
4.
G chord, 4 beats, another 4 beats. Here's that D7th, start your phrase, and it finishes out here. A G major chord, or another one. Start the phrase on the first beat, right there. There's the second one. Back to the G. Play the chord. Now the phrase. And the chord. And the chord. Now the phrase. And finish it. And it repeats back. Chord. Again. Start the phrase. And finish it. Back to the chord. And the chord. And start the phrase. Back to the chord. And the chord. And the phrase. And the chord. Chord. And the phrase. You're going to have to end it on a G here because it's going out. Back to a G chord and end. That's a great rhythm track to teach you how to make the distinction between the G major chord and the D7th chord, which is the 5. In each case, we're in the key of G here, and we're talking about going from the 1 chord to the 5, or the G to the D7th. We don't want to play G or the D majors too much, and especially we cannot play a D major scale or a D major phrase. It just won't work. The notes are not in the scale. We have to think the D7th. So this is a whole new ball game. Let's do primary phrase number 1 for the 7th chords, which goes from the D there on the 5th fret. You'll notice it starts right there on 5 with both pedals down. That's the A and B pedals. And then it goes up and plays an odd note there on 7 with no pedals, up to 8A, and that's the D7th. And then finally on to 10 with no pedals, which is a regular D major, isn't it? And then it ends up with both pedals down, even though it just shows the A pedal, because that's G. So this takes 2 measures to get through a D, a passing tone, a D7th, a D major, and both pedals down. In time, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You could even play this backwards. You might want to start with the without the last note there, the G, start on 10 with no pedals, back to 8A, back to 7, to 5 with the pedals down, and end up maybe back on 3 with the pedals off. Now what we want to do is practice this thing along with the rhythm track. So dig out track number 3 there, which is the 1 to 5 changes. And what you're going to hear is a couple of measures of G. You'll hear, like we're going to play the pads again, like we always have. 2 measures of G. So just play the chord of G maybe on 3, 4 beats, and then maybe another one, maybe strings 4 and 6. And then when it comes to the 5 chord, this is normally where a fill would be, and we're going to play a phrase much like this one in a lot of tunes. Then we jump into our phrase. And the last note there is the actual G note. So we'll play, that'll be one of the G chords, and then another G chord, and then we'll play this phrase again, and working our way up through it. Now we could play it backwards or forward because it doesn't have any direction to it. The phrase is the phrase. All we're establishing is that these notes are the right notes, and we're hearing the sounds of D and D7. So here's track number 3 and the pads. It just goes back and forth again from G to D7, G to D7, and we play the phrase every time the D7 comes up. Again, we're learning the timing of everything again.
1, 2, 3,
chords first.
4.
Now the phrase. Chord. Again, the phrase. Maybe backwards. And forwards. Back down. Kind of a fun game, the D7 scale. Down. Just chords. The phrase. And it has an ending. We'll just end it there on G. Try this one and see how well you do. One, two, three, 4. This one starts from the pedal down position for the D, the 5 A and B, and ends up on the D position without the pedals. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Starts on the D position with no pedals and goes back to the D7th on 8A. 1, 2, 3, 4. Primary 7th chord phrase number 2 works basically off of just the 10th fret there, and we're going to work back to that 8A, which is from a D major on 10 to the D7th on 8A. It makes a nice little scale, and then we'll use this all sorts of ways, forwards and backwards. So here we go. The number 2 starts with the 3rd and 4th strings there on 10 because that's a D major. Back 2 frets, out to the first 2 strings. The A pedal is down here, by the way, to strings 5 and 6, and then up to strings 4 and 5 on 10. So this little phrase sounds like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you might want to end that a little differently. It sounds like the melody's going. You can end on strings 5 and 6 with both pedals down because that's the way the melody would actually go. So whichever way you want to end it. You might want to end it as 10A with strings 4 and 5, but there again both pedals are down, or strings 5 and 6, 10A and B. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, don't be afraid to squeeze those pedals in there. Squeezing is not against the law. Let's put this against track number 3. Again, we're going to play the G major chords,
1,
and then this is
2,
the D7.
3, 4.
Here's the phrase. Chord. The phrase. And the phrase. the phrase. I'm going to mix it in with number 1. Here it is. Here's number 2. Now, back to number 1. Backwards. Number 2. That's a great little game to play because you can mix up the phrase number 1 with number 2 and you get a different sound. You can even take this little phrase and turn it around and find out if you can play this thing backwards. The main thing we're learning to do is learn the notes in the scale, and you might find some whole new phrases. Probably, if you've been playing a year or so, you found things like this and maybe didn't know what you were doing, or you found a phrase and didn't know there were this many notes in it. Whatever, there's a lot going on here. The more you cut loose and just play with it, the better it'll sound. Okay, it's your turn. Starts on the D7th chord position of 13F without the F lever. A 1, 2, 3, 4. A 1, 2, 3, 4. This phrase starts in that D7th spot up there on 13 with the F lever. Of course, you don't see the F lever because we're just playing strings 3 and 5, and that's the fun of this. It doesn't take anything but the 2 pedals, and you can think simple. Just don't miss and hit the 4th string. You'll hate yourself if you do. So it starts up on 13, the 3rd and 5th string, up to 15, which is a G chord, that's true. Then 15 A and B, which is the sound of a D9th, really, a D7th. Up to 17 A and B, which is a real high D chord, and back to 15. So this is part of a G scale, but it's a true D7 scale. Here it goes, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice little phrase. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that can be done backwards. So any way you want to play it, that's fine. Remember, these are just the notes. How you behave with them is up to you in many cases. Let's do it along with the rhythm track number 3. And again, this comes in the D7th chord spots. And there's nothing wrong with us mixing these things up. We can go back and play number 1, number 2, and number 3 because we're building a repertoire of ideas for 7ths. That's all. Rhythm track number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the phrase. Chord. Here's the phrase. Chord. I'll play it backwards this time. And the chord. Play number 2 this time. I'll play number 1 this time, the right way. Here we go, back to number 3. Number 3 again. Backwards, number 3. Really a nice little phrase. Your turn. Starts on the D chord position, no pedals, ends up on the G chord position and the D7th up on 15. A 1, 2, 3, 4. This phrase really builds a nice scale all the way from the 10th fret right on up through the D7th that goes from 10 up to 13 with the F lever. There again, you don't see the F lever because we're not on those strings. Then finally up to 15 and to the 15A and B, which is a D7th and a D9th. So there's 3 possessions of the D and the D7th in here. Starting on 10, 10 with the pedals, up to 13, up to 15. Now, this has an option. You can have 15 there or 15B because it's a D or a D7th and 15A and B. And then back to 15. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of a quick 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's put it along with the rhythm track number 3 in the D7 spot. And again, we can mix things all up here.
1, 2, 3,
chords.
4.
Here's that number 4. Chord. Number 4. And the chord. And the chord. Maybe on strings 3 and 5. Same lick, just up on strings 3 and 5. Same way. And the chord. Back down on 5 and 6. And 5. Playing it on strings 5 and 6 is written is fine, but since 5 and 6 and 3 and 5 are exactly the same notes, only the harmony's turned over, don't be afraid to play this exact same frets, the same pedals, everything, and just reverse it. Play 3 and 5 instead of 5 and 6. It gives you 2 real fine scales for 7th chords. Starts on the D chord position, A and B pedals on 5, goes up to the 8A position, the D7th, back to 5A and B, and finally back to the 3 with the B pedal, which is the D7th. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. This 5th phrase and 5th scale is just a little improvisation, but a little longer scale and maybe a little explosion of what we've been talking about. We're still using the 5th fret, the D that's on 5, up to that odd note or the scale step that's on 7 with no pedals, up to 8A, which is that D7th again, back to that 7th fret, back to 5A and B, let the pedals off, and go down to strings 5 and 6. And that's the D7th back there. We haven't used that one much. 3 with the B pedal, and then finally ending on the G, because this thing must resolve. So this little phrase sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll have to play it a lot faster, won't we? Because there's more notes. So they're all quarter notes, or 1 on every beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we can put this in with that track number 3 and have a lot more fun, because it's a lot more fun to play more notes for some reason, and we get the scale. It makes more sense. Here we go with track number 3.
1, 2, 3.
G chords
4.
first. Here's number 4. Here's the phrase. Phrase 5. Start the phrase now. The phrase. Mixing it up with one of the others. Maybe number 2. And the chord. Maybe number 4. Here we go, number 5 again. This phrase has more notes in it, so if you've been practicing number 1, 2, 3, or 4, they're sort of in half notes, so they're a lot slower. This one obviously has quarter notes, so you're going to have to play twice as fast. But there again, we're trying to practice our recall, aren't we? So you'll have to think the phrase faster. You can't just start playing it and hope to hear it. No, you'll have to hear it first and play it. And that's what we've been talking about all this time, learning to hear a different phrase long before you ever pick it. Starts on the D chord position, 5A and B, ends up down on the 1st fret, the 1F or the D7th down there, and ends up back up on the 3A and B, which is like a D9th to the 3B. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This little phrase is interesting because it uses several positions, and one we haven't really talked about. Look at this phrase. You see us going back all the way to the 1st fret. Well, this is just an octave of the 13th fret, and we said you could go to 13 with the F lever, and if you're careful about the strings you play, especially if you don't play the 4th string or the 8th, you don't actually have to have the F lever in, so we can play strings 3 and 5, or 5 and 6, and that's what we're doing back there on the 1st fret. We're going all the way from 5A and B, back to 3A and B, back to 1 to get the D7. So this makes a good phrase, and it has one spot in there. Notice on 3A and B where we have 2 beats there, like a 2-beat rest. So we're actually getting into some phrasing. So you listen closely and remember how the phrase goes, because it doesn't work unless you get it pretty close to this. So the phrase sounds like this. Starts there on 5 with the A and B pedals down, and on strings 4 and 5, quickly both pedals down again, and playing strings 5 and 6, and sliding all the way to the 1st fret. This was a nice lick that's been going around since the 1960s, so it's a great little phrase. Long slide, get off of the pedals, up to 3A and B, 2 beats there, let the pedals off, and then notice you're playing the 6th and the 7th string, and finally the G note there on 6 and 8. So this sounds like this. Pretty little phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4. That little hanging on of the 3A and B is most important, so squeeze it in. That's part of the phrase that makes it have a little soul. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, this whole thing can be done an octave above. It'll sound just beautiful if you go up to 17 and 15 and back to 13. So that's a pretty little scale, makes a beautiful D7th. And again, let's put this along with track number 3 in the D7 spots. G chords first.
2, 3, 4.
Here's that phrase. Pretty. Here's the phrase. Let's go up an octave above, 15. Quickly, way up there. Nice little vibrato on each note. Again. Maybe back down. And now, and the phrase. Isn't that a neat little phrase? It's easy to turn around. You can play it all sorts of ways, but learn the phrase the way it is. Not too bad, not shabby at all. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Starts on 8A because that's D7th. Back to the 5A and B, D. To the 3B, which is just the D7th there, and ends up with the G. 1, 2, 3, 4. This phrase uses that D7th there that we found on the 8th fret again, and we're going to tie that one in again with the phrase there, or the chord that's down on 5A and B, and finally back to 3 with that B pedal, and then ending up there on 3. So here it is. It starts up on the 8th fret on strings 5 and 8, reaching out. Let that note ring, those two, as a chord, and reach out and hit the second string while it's ringing. These are like little bells going off. Finally up to strings 4 and 6, still holding the A pedal in the whole time. And back to that second string, and then finally back to 5 and 8, and let that the A pedal off. Now back to 5A and B, and hit strings 5 and 6, and back to 3A and B with 3B. So it kind of a little quick trick there on the end. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to get rid of that 5 and 8 string there on the end and play the 5th and 6th. Let's do it along with a rhythm track so you can hear what's going on.
1, 2,
G chords first.
4.
Here it is. And the phrase. And the phrase. Go. Mixing it up with the others. Back to this one. you one of the others. Back to number 7. This little phrase is a little tough on the end, and that's all, but everything else is pretty good. And don't be afraid to squeeze that A pedal there on the first. That gives it soul. Starts on the 8A because that's D7th, and ends up back on 10A and B because that's the G. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, 4. This phrase is easy to recall, especially if you're trying to transpose it in other places, because it doesn't move around a lot, but it's still a pretty good phrase. We're working off of the fact that a D is on 10, and we're going back to 8A and using that D7th right there. So the whole thing is about that 8A position. And it's all in the way you phrase it more than anything, not necessarily the notes. So here's what it sounds like. First 2 notes are long half notes there. 2 notes apiece out to the first 2, to 3 and 4. Now we speed them up, and then finally end up on 10 with the pedals down. So it's the phrase. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first half is slow and the last half speeds up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And yes, you can squeeze those pedals in there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can squeeze the pedals in or out. Again, let's put it along with rhythm track number 3 for the D7th. And we'll mix a few up here.
1, 2, 3,
G chord
4.
first. Here's the phrase. And the phrase. Again, this phrase. And go. And we'll mix them up. One of the others. And number 8. Number 8 again. Pretty nice phrase, easy. It's easy to transpose. That's the main thing. You need one you can find in a hurry. Starts on the 8A because that's the D7th, and ends up down on 5A and B. Both pedals down, sliding back to 10 for the D that's on 10 with no pedals. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or make it slide. 1, 2, 3, 4. This phrase looks at the basic scales we've been learning just in a different way. It starts there on the 8th fret as the 8A, even though you don't see the A pedal. We're there, 8A, and we're playing down to 5A and B, so you can have both pedals. And you can rest there and then go up to the other D, up on 10. Now you might slide from there. Makes a pretty good phrase, even though it may not be written that way. And the pedal goes down for the G on the end. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, 4. Again, it's the phrasing, isn't it? We don't play them all exactly the same. We make it a little interesting by changing up the amount of time we spend on each note. So let's put this in with track number 3, and again, we'll mix them up with a few others.
1, 2,
G chords.
4.
Here it is. G chords. Number 9. Another G chord. A lot of ways you can phrase this little thing. It's easy to improvise, mixing it up. A different one. Number 9. Things are starting to get a lot interesting, aren't they? Because we can mix up a lot of different phrases, and it gets to be the music that you hear on the radio and records all the time. Starts on 13 because that's the 13F D7th, going back down to the D on 10, which is the straight D major. Finally, doing the D7th and the D again, end up on 10 with the pedals. A 1, 2, 3, 4. A 1, 2, 3, 4. This little phrase here, again, uses the same exact D7 scale we've been using, but in a different way, and I get you to look at it 2 different ways again, too. Again, strings 5 and 6 can be turned over, so anything we see written as strings 5 and 6 could be on strings 3 and 5, and the melody and the harmony changes, and that's all. So practice this number 10 both ways, and I'll play it both ways. Here we go. It starts up on the D7th, that's on 13. We just don't see the F lever. Down to 10 A and B, to 10, and then we double up in time. Those are long notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then quickly, and end up there on 10 with the pedals down. Or up on strings 3 and 5 it could be. It's a pretty lick any way we do it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Put it in with a rhythm track, 1 to 5, 1 with 10.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Chords. Here it is. And the chords, 3 and 5. And the chords. Up on 3 and 5. Mixing them up. Back to number 10. One of the others. Back to number 10. That's an easy little scale. We're learning how to work both ways, all up and down, and turn it over on strings 3 and 5. It gives you a variety of great things to play. Starts on D on 10, goes up to that D7th on 13, the F lever position, to the 15B, which is a D7th. 15A and B makes sort of a D9th sound, up through the scale, finally ending up on a G on 15. A 1, 2, 3, 4. A 1, 2, 3, 4. This little phrase right here goes all the way up through a nice long little D7 scale, and you've heard this phrase many, many times behind singers on records for years and years. It starts on the 10th fret, obviously, as a D chord, strings 5 and 6, up to that 13, which is the F lever, D7th, to 15 with the B pedal, which is a D7th, both pedals down, out to the second string, let them ring, up to strings 4 and 5, still both pedals down, up to 1 and 2, and end up on a G at the very top, and that resolves it back to a G. So this is a nice long D7 scale without any interruptions in it. Goes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And yes, it can be played backwards if you want to play this lick. Just leave off the very last note, which is the G, and start with the first 2 strings out there. And end up with a G down there. So it can be both ways. We can go. Or we can go. So it's a good lick, it's a good phrase because it's a scale. Now let's put that in with rhythm track number 3, and we'll mix it up too.
2, 3, 4.
Chords. Here it is, number 11. And another chord. Again, up. Chord. Going up. We'll try it backwards this time. Starting on the outside 2. Again, the reverse. Down. And we'll go up this time. Going down. Going up. Makes a great little ending. It can make a great fill. Anything you want it to be. Looking at this chord chart, you can see that we're in the key of G, but we've got just the G major chords on the front. And then the fill that we're going to have to play is going to be in the chord of C. So we're going to transpose one of our G major chord fills. And we can play this song just using the first 4 G major chord fills. But think what it would be like to play one of the G major chord fills that we did before, move it up 5 frets, and this is where it's going to go as the 4 chord. It'll be a C major chord fill. Then it'll come back in the second line, and Ernie Rowell will be singing in all these lines here on the fronts. We can play the G chords here, or we can play nothing. We've come along far enough here now that we really don't need to play the chords, do we, to stay up with it? Can't you feel the 4 beats and the 4 beats? So it would be better, it'd be more professional if in this spot and this one, each time, don't play anything. However, you'll be coming out of here and you'll be playing the fill here, and probably off the end of this fill, you'll want to resolve it back to a G. You don't want to just cut it off. So maybe there'll be a little G hanging over right there. But that's about it. There again, we don't want to have to play all the time just because we want to stay up with the singer or with a rhythm track. We don't necessarily have to do that. What we're interested in here is learning to play these fills over on this side. Here's going to be one of the D7 fills, and you might make this the first primary phrase D7 just to stay up with it. So each time, what we do over here with the singer is not important because that's sort of behind the scenes going on there, and we don't really need to play the chord. The band's going to play the chord anyway. So we want to concentrate on making a G major chord fill up 5 frets, turning it into a C. How are you going to do that? The D7th fill, pick one, and we're going to play the fill there. Down here, we're going to play the C chord fill again, and this is a great little tune because we have to play in the 4 chord, the 5, the 4, and then back in the 1. So you have to think. This takes a lot of planning, a lot of preparation. So if you don't know your licks and your phrases or how they're going to sound, this might give you a fit. So let's think of it like this. We're going to start off. We don't necessarily have to play here, but we'll play the fill. Try to stay out here and play the fill. Try to stay out here and play the fill. Try to stay out here. Notice we got a quick measure, just one measure of G, then a measure of D7. Those are pretty fast. But if you're not playing at all, that's not necessary, is it? Just let it go by because the singer has that. And then we've got a fill in the very end there. That's in the chord of G. All right, let's listen to the track and just listen to what can happen. The intro is the last line.
3, 4, 1, 2.
A measure of G, D, you can just play the chords, and just play a fill there if you want. Now, here comes the singer.
This old smoke field bar is something
Now, maybe fill number 1. That was a G before. And just sort of lay out. A D7 fill. Sort of lay out. The 4 chord fill right here. You can lay out here. Here's the fill as a G. Back to the top. Here comes your fill. Go. It has to be a C though, doesn't it? Don't necessarily have to play. The D7 fill takes 8 beats. And you're letting it go. The 4 chord fill, the C. And the G chord fill as a 1. Back to the top. Maybe phrase number 3. The major chord fill. Maybe D7 phrase number 3 now. Maybe phrase number 4 here as the G7 or the G moved up to C. One of the G major fills. Whatever comes to mind. 4 chord coming. The fill. Right on the first of the beat every time. Start your fill now. And you lay out. Start your fill now, but on a C chord. Start your fill now. Back to the top. Start now, the 4 chord. Lay out. Start the fill now. Always start on the first beat. 4.
'Cause I'm always here at home till closing
Start the fill now. Last line is a tag again.
Yes, I'm always here at home.
Play a G fill and end it. Go. And you end. That's really a neat tune because it gives you a chance over in these spots. All of those are the perfect places to learn to play all the licks you've been working on here and learning to transpose them. And that's really what it's about. We've got to transpose, don't we? You can't just learn to play the lick as a G, but all the major chord licks can be moved up. The 7th chords can be moved around too, but in this case, this is the 1 and the 4, and they're all major chord licks. And then the 5 has to be a 7th.